What better way than to end the year with quite possibly the best 4K Blu-ray player on the market right now? We've teamed up with our friend Robert over at Value Electronics to bring you Panasonic's flagship player, the UB9000, to test out in our home theater. They've got the exclusive on this model for a couple of months, so if you're interested in ordering one, I'll leave a link down below in the description. All right, let's get this monster unboxed, set up, and go over some settings and check out the video and audio quality. But before we get into it, if you're into anything AV related and want to keep up with the latest and highest quality home entertainment like 4K Blu-rays or media streaming, consider becoming a subscriber for new weekly content. Okay, let's do this. So the UB9000 retails for $1,000. Inside, we get the remote control and surprisingly no documentation. Okay, besides the remote, we do get a power cord. But if you need the manual, you can always download it from their website. Maybe they just forgot to pack mine. So this is the best built player I've ever had hooked up at my theater. The player is comprised of a double layered top plate and aluminum for the side panels. The base of the chassis is also dual layer, so it's pretty heavy, weighing in at 17 pounds. The extra weight and rigidity should keep vibrations and resonance down to a minimum. It's got a great looking, lightly brushed finish and just screams premium high-end quality the second you pick it up. On the front, you'll find the power button, controls for opening and closing the disc tray, track back and forward, stop and play buttons, and a USB input. You'll notice this is THX certified, so you can expect a high level for both audio and video performance. In the center is the LED display and a centrally mounted disc drive. Popping the top, you'll see the disc drive is mounted to a thick steel base, which keeps vibrations and noise away during playback. Opening and closing the tray is smooth like butter and near silent when spinning a disc. It's also got a dedicated audio power supply and a balanced circuit board for analog output, which should keep signal noise low. It'll play back all the main high-res audio formats with a 32-bit 768K DAC for its 2-channel audio playback. Only thing it doesn't play back is SACD and DVD audio, so the Oppo 205 still has got that one covered. Moving on to the back of the player, you have an Ethernet input, 2 HDMI outs with one dedicated for audio only, another USB input, both optical and coax digital outs, the power connection, 7.1 channel analog outs for older receivers and processors, and there's a pair of RCA and XLR outputs for 2-channel listening. Alright, let's get this hooked up to my Sony 900F television and check out some of the settings. Here we have the language selection, and by default, voice guidance is turned on, so you may want to turn it off. Here's the 4K 60 settings. If your TV doesn't support it, just pick no. We have Dolby Vision, which the 900F does support. Quick Start will keep this in standby mode so you can wake it with a smartphone or tablet, so it's always connected to the internet. Now we'll connect it to our network. Now agree to the terms and conditions and we'll be taken to the home screen. First, let's go and check for a firmware update. And of course we have one, so let's go ahead and get to that. This whole process took around 20 minutes, but it could be quicker depending on your network speed. Alright, now that that's done, let's take a look at some of the settings. Under HDMI, we get some resolution options here, but I'm just going to keep it on auto. Under 4K 60 output, we have the option to output at 444. Panasonic has some excellent processing, which will help out with the colors, giving the image some nice transitional gradations and a cleaner, smoother look. You can always change it if something seems off. I'm going to keep 24p to auto. HDMI video out, I'll keep this on auto too. HDMI audio out, I'll just keep this as audio because if they both are set to video plus audio, you won't get 4K HDR output. If your display supports Dolby Vision, you may want to keep this one on. This does support HDR+, but my TV doesn't support it, so I'll leave it off. For color mode, I'll leave it on auto. I think you'll find that you can keep most of the settings on auto since the player can detect what your display can handle. HDR color gamut, I'll leave this on auto as well. SDR to HDR conversion will always run SDR content in HDR. I'm going to keep this one off. We have the same thing here for HLG to HDR conversion. Going to keep this off too. Now we have the HDR display type. Depending on the type of display you have, the player can dynamically tone map HDR content to your display's capabilities. Since I've got the 900F, I'm going to leave this at middle or high luminance. The rest of this section is self-explanatory, so just hit the pause button if you need to see something. Now for the audio section. Be sure you keep these on bitstream if you want Atmos and DTS:X playback. Here you can downsample the audio if your device doesn't support these higher bit rates. This setting lets you prioritize audio quality by decreasing video quality. Under high clarity sound, you can choose to have music playback through either HDMI, the digital outs, or analog, and have the LED display shut off. This should reduce any of the noise coming from the outputs, keeping your audio noise-free. The rest of these settings are pretty basic items. Okay, let's head out and see what's in the App Store. If there's one major flaw with this player, you're looking at it. This is one of the worst, most janky user interfaces I've ever used in quite some time. They really need to step up their game with this. Looking at the market, there's nothing really major in here. Netflix and YouTube is already installed, and there's no Vudu or Hulu or any of the other big-time streaming services here. So let's go on and get out of this. Let's check out Netflix. If you look up in the upper right corner, you'll see that Dolby Vision is active, and this is just the menu. Taking a peek at Daredevil, you'll see that Dolby Vision and Atmos are both supported here. And just a quick check in the Sony picture menu does confirm that Dolby Vision does work. Now backing out of this and checking out Friends shows Dolby Vision is active even with non-Dolby Vision or HDR content. So I'm hoping Panasonic or Netflix gets on top of this issue. All right, let's get out of this Netflix app and see if we have the same issue with Amazon Prime. Looks like Jack Ryan is in Dolby Vision and 5.1. The DV logo pops up and it's working proper here in the TV settings. Jumping to a very English scandal shows standard HDR and 5.1. And from the looks of it, it does indeed switch properly between HDR10 and Dolby Vision. As far as video stream quality, both Amazon and Netflix look solid with no glaring distracting compression artifacts, but I guess would really depend on how fast your network speed is. It's still not as good as a physical disc, but I didn't have any complaints. Now let's give YouTube 4K HDR a look. A quick look at the Sony settings confirms HDR does work within the YouTube app as well. Now let's throw in the Soli 4K Blu-ray. I picked a scene with some crazy bright highlights that's mastered at 4000 nits. A quick tap on the status button gives you some basic info. A second tap brings up title, chapter, and timeline info. Hitting the playback info button gives you some more detailed information, resolution, bit depth, and audio format. Another tap will go a little deeper and give you the metadata from the disc. Your max light level here is 4000 nits of brightness with an average frame rate level of 290. A tap on the video settings button takes you to the HDR optimizer options. If you keep your eye on the ball of fire, you can see it looks blown out without any highlight detail. Turning the HDR optimizer on brings back all those varying shades of reds and oranges, but the overall image does take a slight hit in brightness. It's one of those things you have to make a compromise on. Ultimate brightness with loss of detail, or added detail with a hit on brightness. There are some other settings here which you can adjust to fine-tune to your exact liking. You've got dynamic range adjustment and a brightness slider. You can even adjust the tone curves for black and white. By changing these two settings, I didn't notice that much of a change on the TV, but changing these curves on my projector made a much bigger difference in displaying extra shadow detail. I suppose depending on how good your display is, the optimizer feature may not make that big of an impact. If your display is brightness challenged, these settings could work wonders. Now just another look at the optimizer on and off. I think it makes a pretty big difference with the added detail here. The slight hit in brightness, I could probably live with. And just real quick, if you're throwing in a Dolby Vision disc, you cannot use the HDR optimizer settings. Alright, let's check one other thing. Media playback from a USB stick. This is an MKV of Justice League in 1080p and Dolby Digital. You've got pretty much the same video adjustments here except for the HDR settings. And I gotta say, the upscaling here looks very good. There's some compression artifacts you probably can't see on your TV, but edges do look smooth and detailed. Not 4K crisp, but pretty sharp considering it's a 1080p compressed file. So there it is. Aside from the added audio-centric features like the dedicated audio power supply and upgraded DAC, video performance and features are the same as on their own UB820, which is half the price of the UB9000. And that's a great thing, because I think the Panasonic players this year are clearly the players to get if you value image quality. The HDR optimizer feature is what really sets these players apart from others available right now. Being able to dial in that extra bit of detail in bright highlighted areas and extra shadow detail is just something no other player can accomplish. This feature also works amazing for projectors with low light output. Now, as mentioned before, there was an issue with Netflix always outputting in Dolby Vision no matter what content I was playing. Whether it was standard HDR or just 1080p, Dolby Vision always remained active. I'm sure this can be corrected by a firmware update, but as of right now, I couldn't find a workaround for it other than going into the settings and turning off Dolby Vision. Amazon Prime, however, worked perfectly switching between HDR formats. So, no problems with that. A couple other quirks that I noticed is that there were times when I was backing out of the Netflix app, the screen would just freeze and leave me on an all black screen. So I'd have to power it off, then back on, and everything would be fine again. Also during playback, there were quite a few times after pausing and hitting play again, I'd lose sound completely. Stopping and starting the movie got things back to normal, but this did happen more times than I would have liked. Now, if you're looking for a specific scene and want to pause and advance frame by frame, I was able to advance forward, but not go backwards. And other times, it just didn't do anything. I know it's kind of a small issue, but I figured I'd mention it. Besides the Netflix Dolby Vision issue, which I heard all the other 9000s have, there may be a chance that these other quirks that I noticed could just be a one-off with my player. So if you've got one of these, let us know if you've experienced any of these issues as well. As far as noise when playing back discs, it was whisper quiet and would load movies super quick. So if you have the player out in the open, then you should be totally fine without it drawing attention to itself. As for audio playback, the only other player that I could compare it to is the Oppo 203. And at least to my ears, going from XLR out and playing some high-res files, there was slightly more detail on the top end compared to the 203. I know that may not be a fair comparison because I really should be comparing it to the 205, but it is what I have on hand. And speaking of audio playback, if you're playing back MKV files with Dolby Atmos or DTS:X, it doesn't work. There's also one more thing that's missing that every player except for the Oppo players is missing. That's support for anamorphic stretching. Those of us with projectors using scope screens and anamorphic lenses need to have this 21:9 stretch option. If you're using a dedicated video scaler, then it's not really an issue. But for my situation and many others, the 21:9 feature is a must-have. This is a $1,000 video player powerhouse. Panasonic, why wouldn't you have this feature? I so wanted to keep you. Okay, so who's this player for? If you're a home theater enthusiast and want the best built 4K player on the market, I can't think of anything else that touches it. It's clearly got the best image quality with enough video settings to tweak for even the most die-hard videophile. If you're a die-hard audiophile, on the other hand, the omission of SACD and DVD audio may be a deal breaker if you've got a large collection. But 2-channel audio sounded great, and it played back every file that I used. I know $1,000 is steep, but once you put this player in your hands, you'll know exactly where that money's going. This player isn't aimed at everyone, but if you do want the same image quality minus the high-end build and audio features, the Panasonic UB820 is the next best thing at half the cost. So that's all I got for now. If you guys are interested in grabbing this player, I'd advise you to give the folks at Value Electronics a call, as they will be the exclusive dealer for this player for the next couple of months. Be sure to ask for Robert and tell them that Spare Change sent you. Now, if you found this video useful, give it a like, leave us a comment, and let us know if you'll be picking up the UB9000 or if you already have it. Follow us on social media and check us out on Patreon. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys again in the next video.